On August the 3rd, I received an email from RamaWorks, not addressed to the channel, just a regular newsletter going to my private email account. In said newsletter, they announced the discovery of some extra legacy keyboards for sale, in stock and ready to ship. With a healthy dose of skepticism mixed in with a little bit of optimism, I eagerly clicked on the included link, and to my surprise, they had a couple of U80As in their arsenal. This is a board I've been eyeballing for a while now, but also have written off because it was one of RamaWorks' earliest creations, released over 4 years ago in 2019. With a slight refresh, the U80B in the summer of 2022. Why I didn't pick one up then? I don't know, but I was glad I finally had a chance to do that now. But there was one problem: there was no hot swap PCBs. It's not that I have never soldered a board together, it's just the commitment it entails is one that I don't particularly like because I'm quite flaky and I have no real idea what I actually want. But it launched me into a much more thorough research mission, one where I set out to find the perfect parts to build the perfect board, one that I didn't want to touch again because I can't. Well, technically I can desolder, but I have a condition called being a lazy ass. So, if you're in a similar situation, maybe this video can help, or maybe not, because I kind of failed at it. Before we get into the keyboard choices, I just want to add one big asterisk to this entire video. Almost every decision you make for your custom keyboard depends extremely on your own preferences. There is no "this is how you find the best matching keycaps to the board XYZ. Some people will love certain choices, some will hate them. I also try to get everything in stock. I didn't want to join any group buys, and the ideas shown in this video are focused on that approach as well. It's not always possible, but there might be places you haven't tried looking before. This video of course can't solve all the problems, it's also not a dead set approach, it's just how I did it, and most likely there are way more methods to get to the finish line, but enough disclaimers. Let's begin with the keyboard. The choice of course is, just as we heard, the U80A from RamaWorks, and even though we just talked about it, let's briefly discuss that choice too, before moving on to keycaps, switches, stabs and other accessories. In most cases, at least for me, the keyboard is quite literally the base, the starting point. The color can sometimes be a bit finicky to choose, but generally these days I know when a board catches my attention enough to warrant a purchase. The problem with color is trying to figure out what you might want. If you don't already have a keycap set in mind, you might hold off on purchasing the board altogether and try to find a matching set and then go back to the keyboard, which can be a bit stressful in the midst of an approaching group buy deadline. In my case, the limited options in stock were actually a blessing and resulted in me having to make a decision fast. I picked up the Moon variant because I don't have a dark grey board in my current arsenal and I really wanted to get one, despite its arguably underwhelming flashiness. The order in which you approach a custom build also doesn't really matter if you ask me. Sometimes it's a keycap set that hooks you, sometimes it's the board that gets everything rolling. Sometimes you might even ping pong around and end up buying nothing. But I had a feeling that this might be one of the very last chances to ever get a U80A. I mean, how many of these are they gonna find hiding in a corner again, right? The real problem with keycaps these days is the sheer choice you have. There are so many out there, and a surprisingly large amount are also ready to ship. Numerous shops are eager to unload their stock, and I have seen more than one site offering 2-for-1 deals in recent months, especially on GMK sets, which was unheard of just about a year ago. But where do you start when you have no idea? Well, I asked some of you and what your processes were, and just like myself, a big inspiration is social, and for me, that's Instagram. There are a lot of very talented people out there who post amazing and beautiful keycap and board combos, and it's exactly that kind of inspiration that may spark an idea that's worth following. I linked some of my favorite profiles down in the description below, but there are so many more, so big apologies that I'm not able to include all of them. Whenever you hear or get advice like this, it can be a bit daunting at first. After all, there are hundreds if not thousands of photos out there, and spending an entire afternoon doom scrolling through Instagram can be a bit tiresome. This is why I would encourage everyone to create lists on Instagram or any other platform. So whenever you see something that makes you go, ooh, that looks nice, maybe instead of just liking it, save it to a list. The idea is to create a collection a la Pinterest over time so that once you need it, you get an index ready to look up. This is also how I found myself with the GMK DualShot 2 set. Just like the U80, I've been eyeballing this for ages but never found a matching board for it. I didn't want to pre-purchase it because it was a very specific set, and also because I wanted the novelties too, so it was a very costly combo as well, that I didn't want to end up lying around and collecting regret. Before I landed on it though, and as an alternative to going through social media hell, you can also do the old shop run and basically check every known vendor within your vicinity and see what they have in stock. As much as I like sites like Stock that keep track of in-stock keyboard parts, they don't always know everything, and at this point I have a few shops I check regularly whenever I need something. Again, I left some of my favorites in the description below, but beware, depending on where you live, the shipping costs can be a blocker. Even if the item in question is just a tiny little artisan, it can sometimes cost more than what you're willing to pay, so beware of shipping. But let's say you found your keycap inspiration on social and after going through some stores, you realize it's no longer in stock. What do you do then? Well, there's the second-hand market, which can be a goldmine to find exactly what you are looking for, sometimes even at a reasonable price. The best place I've found yet is of course Mac Market on Reddit. I never made a purchase there, but it seems lively and was something that was also suggested to me in one of my previous videos. I've also found shops that seem to specialize in second-hand items, but most often they seem to cater to the Asian market and weren't in English. But in case that option ends up without any leads, you might find yourself cornered and in search of an alternative. Literally. If the keycap set in mind is of the very popular kind, you might find something similar, even from a different brand. For example, take the GMK Oblivion set, which looks similar to GMK Nord or Dracula. We can also stretch a bit more and have a look at the Mode Designs Tomorrow keycaps or PB Defense Retro Lights. Okay, maybe that's a bit too much stretching, but I hope you get the idea. There are sometimes alternatives from other brands that might work as well if you're not too picky. However, if you are hell set on getting that particular color combo, there is one last resort I found that sometimes actually works. When googling for caps, you are depending on the SEO of the vendors that signed up to carry them. That is the search engine optimization that makes them pop up at the top of the results. But what if they didn't do such a good job at that? Well, try to find the original interest check for the keycaps, because all the official vendors should be listed there. Interest checks are often the first contact with the public when it comes to keycaps and keyboards, and contain a lot of information including which vendors will carry the keycaps during the group buy phase, and inevitably also extras once they are produced. And usually you're going to have one for each region, sometimes even more. But don't let that region lock you out. Even if they are on the other side of the planet, some do ship internationally, and if you're lucky, not at an outrageous price, which is how I ended up with my DS2s. Officially they are from Omnitype, which is based in the US and much closer to me, but the shipping from ilumkeyb.com, which is in Singapore, was about 30% cheaper, and they also had them on sale. Still do actually, so make sure to check the IC pages. You might get lucky with a set that you were looking for a while, but never found it in stock within your regional vendor. Just search for the set name on Google along with interest check. If you end up on geekhack.org, you're most likely in the right place. Now, if you thought keycaps seemed like an overly difficult choice to make, have I got news for you. Switchers are worse. Normally I wouldn't bother that much and just try to find the right ones along the way, but since I had to solder these in, I wanted to get it right, so I spent more time trying to figure out which ones would work. I started by doing what most of you suggested as well, checking out YouTube, watching videos, and listening to sound demos. Everything to figure out what the right direction might be. But sound demos can be deceiving and should never be taken as an absolute. It can point towards a general direction, but even with the exact same parts, you might end up hearing different results than what a microphone half across the world picked up. The other problem is feel, something you can never replicate through any video. Our choices and preferences all vary and differ from board to board. On the Monica Necker, for example, I can't stand linears. It has to be tactile, otherwise I have the urge to immediately rip out its guts. Of course, the best thing would be a meetup. Being able to experience boards in person is a blessing, but those don't pop up on request. So what did I end up doing? Well, it might be a bit tiresome, but once I had the U80 in hand, I started by trying out every switch I had one by one. I assembled a board without soldering and worked my way through. The results? Inconclusive. It did narrow it down to linears though. I was sure of that, as neither tactile nor clicky seemed to work, but none of the switches felt overly good, so I had to continue my search. Now when it comes to switches, just like with keycaps, I feel there are a few authorities I like to browse through to get an idea of what is available, this time on YouTube though. Some channels go very deep into switch reviews, but even then one person's dream might be another one's nightmare, so be very careful, you'll see why later. If you live in the US, you might want to try out a service called Milktooth. I personally have never used them, but it was suggested to me. It's a brilliant idea really, you get to try out switches in your own home for 5 days before having to send them back. This way you can get at least a better idea, and with the vast selection of switches that they seem to have, it's a great way to experience some of the more elusive ones. Wish they had something like this in Europe. However, I still think a switch tester or even just a selection of switches isn't enough to give you a full picture. This is why I went a little deeper with my own ones. I had a few that seemed like they could be a good fit, so I took the shortlist and filled up the board to around 50 to 60%, just to get a basic feel for typing, and the results were pretty eye-opening. On the individual tests, I thought these Gateron X switches were pretty alright, really good even, but doing some actual typing, I hated the sound and the feel of them, and the rest of the other switches didn't fare better either. The only thing I knew at that time was that it had to be linear with an actuation force between 45 and 55. And then I discovered a site called Theremin Goat's Switches. These are the most comprehensive switch test articles I have ever seen, and I love it. There's even an insane ranking list on GitHub of every switch that made an appearance, and on top of that, the elusive Alpaca V2s. I heard much about the alpacas years prior, just like the holy pandas, bobas and others. These seem to be the switches made of legend, and I thought what a perfect match this would be to the U80. Now, I never tried alpacas before, and I was willing to get 100 of these with the potential of them being a complete mismatch. I even found somebody who had them on the U80 with a sound test that seemed quite alright. So I pulled the trigger, leaned back and waited for them to arrive. In the meantime, let's get some of that miscellaneous stuff done. Now for stabilizers, I'm not that picky, but after my last video where I talked about them, I got lots of comments regarding Stabbies and TX ones, and you folks were right, those are really nice, and since then I've tried a lot more and have found myself preferring these as well. I will say that I wanted to go for Stabbies on this. I can't say why, it's just that my last two boards featuring Stabbies ended up having really nice space bars, but I couldn't find anything in stock at the time and alternated to the latest TX version, which I promptly ordered. I like these in their funky plugs, and this latest version seems extremely tight with almost no tolerances to create a very solid feel. You won't get around without a loop though, but if you're building a custom keyboard, please lube your stabs. Lube! The next part is kinda interesting and something I didn't know existed. During my plentiful research for what would best fit this board, I came across several people who added a layer of PE foam to their U80s, and doing a quick Google search, I found a company called Green Door Geeks that sells third-party PE foam for some of the more popular boards, including the U80A. Neat. But there's even more. During the original U80 group buy, one was able to also purchase the internal dampener. Wait a second. Why is this in stock now? Get the f*** out of here! Oh come on, RamaWorks, really? Why is this in stock now and not when I ordered it? Anyway, during the time when I bought the U80, this didn't exist, so I searched for an alternative, even tried to find one secondhand but had no success, but then came across another funnily named company called Stupid Fish Design. Yeah, I wasn't kidding about the name. Actually, I love it, and the logo is brilliant too. The box was a treat as well, so whoever came up with this needs a raise. Again, didn't know this existed, love that it does, and they too have precisely cut pieces of foam for your favorite boards. With all these extras ordered, this most extensive keyboard build was coming along nicely, and I hadn't been this excited for a build in a while. So after putting everything together, how did it sound and feel? Yeah, I really don't like it. Yep, I don't think the alpacas are it at all. They are super smooth switches, don't get me wrong, but they rattle too much on this board and make everything sound too noisy. Luckily, there is one thing that I left out. I cheated, because during the very last steps after I bought all the other parts, I stumbled across one other thing: Mil-Max sockets, and these saved the day in the end. This might result in a bit of an anticlimactic ending or twist to this video, if you will, which primarily focused on planning, but it also shows that even with the best planning, if you haven't had a chance to try out everything combined, you really don't know how it's gonna turn out. But what are Mil-Max sockets exactly, and what do they do? Well, they turn your solder PCB into a hot swap one, with minimum effort. You insert these sockets into the existing switch holes so your switches can make contact with the PCB without being permanently fixed into it, and afterwards you solder them in place on the other side, and congratulations, you've converted your PCB. What an age we live in. But there's even more. After I figured out the alpacas weren't a match, I decided to go back and give all of my other linears another try, this time by giving every one of them the 60% treatment. And lo and behold, an old favorite emerged that seems to hit all the right spots, the Wisterias from Zapsody. To me, this switch proves a fantastic point. When I originally tried out switches individually, these didn't even end up in my top 3, but when used throughout the board, they were exactly what I was looking for. I'm not saying that switch testers don't work, but I know that they don't work for me. It also shows that continued experimentation on an existing board can further improve it. Nothing is ever final, even if it comes with that tag, you can convert it. I hope this didn't mitigate all the previous points about planning, research, and slowly picking the right parts. I still think those are all valid points, but so often, once you have everything in front of you, the picture changes for better or worse. So maybe don't try to buy everything at once. Get it one by one. I know it can be a little bit hard to have to wait every step, but the results can be a lot more rewarding in the long run and be a bit more kind to your wallet. These alpacas will eventually find a home in another board, I'm sure of it. I just hope I don't buy new switches with that board and repeat the entire process again. Or with the keycaps. Or the board itself. Or everything. Please, please don't let it be everything. Not again. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this different take on a build, and as always, let me know what you thought of it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and see you all in the next one. Bye!